Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Backstory STL. For First Alert 4, I'm Matt Woods. My guest this week is a Webster University professor and a foremost expert in the increasingly important field of media literacy. She has advocated for a law to boost education on media literacy in Missouri and published a book in 2015 on how teaching it can save our plugged-in world. Many claim that media consumption is detrimental to society, but she argues that it doesn't have to be. Here's the backstory of Julie Smith. And so, where should we start? Maybe the internet or something like that.
I actually got into media literacy when television was still a thing.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And so what was like what were the big topics on media literacy back then?
How to understand how television programs get scheduled. And I know that seems like so basic now, but it was simple, like, ESPN is going to show figure skating on Monday nights because everybody's watching Monday Night Football, so they have to go for the female audience, stuff like that. And how women are portrayed in advertising and why the dialogue of Dawson's Creek was so unrealistic. Like, that's what we were talking about then in my first teaching job. It seems like ages ago.
Such a simple time.
I know, yeah.
And now we have the internet and the age of information.
It's like trying to drink out of a fire hose, right?
Wow.
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges is that there's just so much information we don't even know what's real, meaningful, valid, or true anymore. It's hard.
Well, and so what I've seen around the time that the internet was really catching on, like, wasn't it a dominant, there was a dominant theory that because of the proliferation of information that the good information would trump the bad and it would help so much with misinformation and stuff like that?
Misinformation really wasn't that big of a deal until years later, because when the internet started, it was very pushed news. It was mainly, you had to have a lot of money to be online, right, to host a website and all of that. So not everybody could just get online and share whatever they wanted, like we can now. So then all of the big, like the legacy media, they had websites that we could go to. Then it kind of morphed into what we call Web 2.0, where it became user-generated. So that the top websites now are all websites where we generate the content. So it's very different than it was when it first started.
Yeah. Did you foresee the situation we're in now?
Oh,
or was
no.
it even possible? It doesn't seem like
I'm sure some people did, but I did not. I did not. I feel like I buckled myself in a few years ago and I'm just seeing where all this goes.
Yeah. And so when you say media literacy, I think a lot of people don't know exactly how to define that.
Yeah.
What's the elevator pitch of like what that is?
The elevator pitch. Okay, the latest research says that Americans are spending between 10 and 11 hours a day consuming electronic mass media. And those of us that are really excited about media literacy, we don't say that that's bad. What we say is, why aren't we talking about this more? We don't talk about this enough, right? Because the media help us define ourselves, they help us define each other, they affect our worldview, and we're not talking about those effects enough and what it all means. So media literacy is not anti-media at all. It's a process, not a product. And we want people to ask questions about every media message that they receive, whether it's a TikTok video or something on YouTube or a tweet or a TV show, a magazine, a movie, a textbook. Who's the sender of the message? What's their motive or intent? How is the message designed to get my attention? What information is left out? And who benefits from this? So it's critical thinking is what it is, Matt.
Yeah, just yesterday, somebody who I'm friends with on Facebook had reposted it was a picture of Casey Anthony, who was the woman from the famous trial, and it was a post about her starting a daycare center somewhere, and I said, the reposter, my friend on Facebook, said, please don't be true or something like that. And I'm like, there's no way this is true. But the first thing you do, you go to the page of the original post.
Right.
And it literally says satire/parody.
Right.
Right there.
But
it's like,
you made the point of going to that original page.
right.
And most people don't, because when we're online and scrolling, we move so fast, we don't really pay attention to what we consume and what we share, because we're moving so fast all the time.
Yeah, and when you're in the business of the media or media adjacent business, like the way you consume it is just so much different because you're a part of it all the time. And so it's hard to pretend that you don't have that, in the ways that other people consume media, you know what I mean? It's like...
There's a term that we live in an era now of polled news, which is great because we have thousands of sources for news, right? But that's also bad because we have thousands of sources. We choose the sources that we agree with. We choose the sources that affirm what we already believe. So I'm a real believer that a lot of the cable news networks don't change anybody's minds. All they're doing is giving their audience exactly what they want. It's a business. It's a business, and we don't talk about the money enough. Like if we're using an app or a website for free, do we understand we're not the customer? We're the product being sold. Our eyeballs and our attention is being sold. So we have to understand the role that we play in the economic structure of all this, I think, a little more than we do.
Wow, so the product and not the customer, that's like a crazy concept.
Yeah.
So, and with the data privacy laws, which I don't know how much you have gotten into that in your work, but my understanding is that in the US, a lot of the data privacy laws are kind of behind other parts of the world and what can be sold to you and go the cookies from a website and all that stuff where you're like constantly being tracked online.
Well, anytime our phones are on, we're being tracked. Anytime we use Wi-Fi, we're being tracked. So the idea of being concerned about our data, I think that horse ran out of the barn years ago. But there are, like the EU has a much stricter privacy law than we do. But we have to remember too, we are giving these companies all this information. It's not like they're forcing us. We hand Mark Zuckerberg all kinds of information about us every day, willingly. And we don't think about that.
Is it really willingly though? Like, that I agree to the terms and conditions, check the box.
Which nobody reads.
Which nobody reads, but it's also, 8,000 pages long.
Oh, deliberately, because they don't want us to read them. Right. What I mean is that what we're giving is what the algorithm keeps track of. Like the YouTube algorithm even keeps track of the videos that you've seen all the way through, that you've watched all the way through. Every site keeps track of what we like, what we've shared, what we comment on. So that's the information I mean that we're giving. Our data and our browsing data is really open for bidders.
So I should become a Luddite is what I'm hearing.
No, not necessarily. if and you're right, no one reads the terms of service. There was a survey once, I think 11% of Americans said that they read them, and I was like, they're all lying.
I was like, yeah, 11%, that would be fascinating.
And I think, we don't realize what we've agreed to, right? But I also think that if we read, and I can't remember where I heard this, but that Microsoft's terms of service are almost as long as Shakespeare's Macbeth. So they're not user-friendly.
Yeah, wish there was a way to make that slightly easier. And so, what made you want to get into? How did you get your start in this arena?
I stumbled into it actually. I was a media junkie growing up. I would watch TV with the transistor radio. I'm dating myself, I realize. I would listen to the radio and watch TV at the same time. The day I got my Sony Walkman was a significant day because that was the first time that media was personal and portable and private. You could kind of escape into your own world, which everybody does now, but that was a new thing then. In my home, we got the Globe Democrat in the morning, Time Magazine, Sports Illustrated, U.S. News and World Report. There was always media coming in, and I loved it. I consumed as much of it as I could. So then, after I graduated from college, I worked for a company that would pay for graduate school. And I thought, well, I might as well get a master's, right? And I thought, well, if I'm going to work all day and then sit in class all night, like it has to be something that I really like. What were my favorite classes when I was an undergrad? And that's why I chose mass comm. So I ended up with a master's in mass communication, and I did my thesis on the media literacy movement and how it really hadn't picked up speed in the United States because it's law in many other countries, but not here. And that ended up into a teaching job, which ended up into, basically became a university teaching job, and now a consulting job where I go around and teach people how to do this.
Okay. What kind of companies do you consult for?
Well, actually, it's school districts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so school districts will hire me to do professional development. I keynote a lot of conferences, like tech conferences and education conferences. I also talk to parent groups about social media, and I talk to high schoolers about their social media use.
How do those people react when you're telling this? Are they like, we've never thought about this in this way?
Yeah, some are really surprised that we haven't talked about it in this way before. But a lot of the teachers that I talk to are struggling with the media use of the kids in the classroom, and trying to keep their attention and help the kids understand what's real and what's not and how this all affects them. So I think what's really cool about media literacy education is that it's so cross-curricular, right? If you're a journalism teacher, you can use it. If you're a math teacher, you could talk about how charts and graphs can be created to be misleading.
Right.
Yeah. If you're a science teacher, you can talk about polling questions and how they're written depends on what answer you're going to get. If you're a history teacher, you can compare Hollywood to history. There's lots of ways. Health teachers could even use media literacy analyzing tobacco ads and liquor ads. Right. So there's ways to include media literacy into almost everything that we're already teaching.
And this, there's a current bill in Missouri that would mandate the teaching of media literacy in some way. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But it doesn't mandate for the whole state. It's starting out with pilot programs.
Oh, okay.
So 5 or 6 pilot districts around the state would be willing to have some training in media literacy. Of course, we would do data beforehand, right? Teach media literacy and then do data after to see if it made any difference. And the bill is, I think, scheduled to be debated. This is the farthest that it's gone so far. It's House Bill 116. So it's exciting. And I love the idea that it starts with pilot programs instead of, because in Illinois, they passed a law that it was an unfunded mandate that every high school had to teach media literacy, but there was no training. They just kind of threw this at the teachers. And obviously, nothing's happening.
Right. So in other words, the implementation might not be so great.
Or at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And so do you know what districts that would be, or is that all to be determined down the line?
That's to be determined, but a lot of districts are already very interested. I've actually spoken to 70 different high schools in Missouri, so I know that at least those schools are interested in advocating for media literacy education.
So have you been calling up senators' office and state reps and saying hey, this is something you need to be looking at?
Actually, I did get to testify in Jeff City in, I think it was late January. And it was really fun because they were debating the bill in the Elementary and Secondary Education Committee. So it wasn't the full House. It was probably 20 or 25 representatives.
Gotcha.
And then those of us that were advocating for the bill spoke, and then people who were against it also spoke. But thankfully, there were a lot more for than against.
I would imagine that there would be, right? Because, I think generally people are like, oh yeah, that's something that's generally seen as a good thing because of, all the media consumption that we have.
And it's not political. It's not. In fact, one of the women that spoke out against the bill in Jeff City said, any Republican should hate this. And I thought, well, that's interesting because it's a Republican that sponsored it. So it's not political. It's all about process. It's not partisan at all. It doesn't have anything to do with Democrats or Republicans. It's all about analyzing the messages that we get, no matter who's giving us the messages.
Yeah. How do you think the 25 reps that heard it received it? Was it generally positive?
Yes, and it was voted on the following week, and it passed with only one no vote.
Okay. So when you're testifying, are they actually asking you questions, or you're just making your case?
Well, I made my case first, and I got really worked up, and then they did ask some questions afterwards, and I felt like I got lucky. I went after Representative Jim Murphy, who's the sponsor of the bill, and they had some questions for him that I was furiously scribbling down answers to, so that when it was my turn to speak, I could address those questions. We didn't have a ton of questions. I think we did a pretty good job selling it, at least in the committee.
Is Murphy a local rep?
Yes, he is.
Okay, that's what I
Yes.
thought.
Yeah.
And then and was there any what were, besides you said the woman's argument against it, were there any arguments you thought, oh, that's actually a good point, maybe that could change the implementation of the
Well,
bill?
there was someone there from the Missouri Association of School Librarians. There was someone there from the Missouri Superintendents Association that brought up what they're seeing in their schools and how media literacy would be so necessary and beneficial. So I'm lucky because I teach in the School of Communications at Webster, so a lot of the students that I have are already pretty savvy. So if I was teaching middle school, I think I'd feel very, very different.
And how long have you been at Webster?
About 21, 22 years.
Oh, well, yeah. I graduated from there 4 years ago, and this was my first job out of college, but I'm really glad that I went to Webster because small school, but you can, sometimes that can be used to your benefit to get
absolutely.
a great education. So.
Absolutely.
And so, what obviously, if we have it in school districts, that can help. We'll see how the pilot program goes if the bill passes. But what are some things maybe that people personally can take from this if they're listening to be better media consumers?
How do you define better media consumers?
That's a good question, actually. I don't even know, really. Maybe to not fall prey to the bad stuff?
How do you define bad stuff?
Yeah, that's another good question.
That's what happens when you ask a professor.
This is
to come on
this
your
is
podcast.
this is lesson 1 for the pilot program if it passes. Define the bad stuff.
What my biggest fear is, well, one of the arguments that people had against the bill was that it's just one more thing we're asking the teachers to do. And that's true. We are asking the teachers to do one more thing. But I don't feel like this is an issue for the education department. This is a social issue. We should be talking about it in classrooms, but also family rooms and kitchen tables and minivans. We should be having these conversations all the time. But the schools are a great place to start because then maybe the kids will talk about it at home. Okay, so that was one of them. My biggest fear when it comes to media literacy is that people really don't want to be media literate because our echo chambers are really so comfortable, right?
It is really cozy.
It is really cozy, and because we've trained our algorithms on every website that we check every day, we are never confronted with any message that we didn't really already kind of approve.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it almost makes it more difficult for people to learn how to have difficult conversations because they're not used to being confronted with something that they disagree with.
But weren't Facebook and X and YouTube, at the beginning, wasn't the algorithm wasn't such a big deal, right? Whenever you watched a YouTube video, now the algorithm is so good. If you watch a video of, greatest home runs of MLB in 2010,
then the next one will be 2011.
Right.
Yeah.
They're gonna think, give you more of this.
YouTube and TikTok algorithms are the strongest that I've ever seen. I have a friend who says that he thinks TikTok knows him better than his wife does. That could be true. But it didn't start out that way. You're right, Matt. What Facebook did, which I think was really interesting, instead of, because if you were on years ago, right, your newsfeed was just people that you're connected with that had posted in chronological order.
Right.
Right. Then they switched to something that they called meaningful social interactions. Okay. Now, how they define meaningful is if it gets clicks.
Engagement.
Engagement. Right. And if we are angry, we stay online longer. And the longer we stay online, the more money they make. So it doesn't behoove them for us to like each other. Okay. So what Facebook started doing is assigning numerical values to posts. So if I posted something about, a cute cat, it's not going to get a lot of response. But if I post something about vaccines or politics or something that's contentious, and maybe it gets a lot of comments, including the comments with like that angry orange face, you know, that's a meaningful social interaction according to Facebook. And that means that my post will be seen on other people's timelines, even if I'm not connected with them.
Right. It's like this person that you're friends with liked this or commented on it, and so now you're seeing it and you're more likely to interact with it because just fear is just a
right. Oh, fear sells.
A driving force.
Fear absolutely sells, and if it's a message that we really like and it makes the politician we hate look bad, we're gonna share it without ever checking for authenticity.
Right. A video clip from this podcast might get a couple of likes, even if it's a really good conversation, and then about this senator or this guy who's very outspoken, or a lot of people hate him, a lot of people love him, and then it's just a shouting match in the comments on Facebook. I mean, that happens all the time with our posts on, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a controversial thing per se, or the framing of it may not be controversial, but people, and a lot of times people will just read the headline and not even read the lead of the story or click on it, and then they're commenting on it and giving their opinion.
In many cases, the headline doesn't have anything to do with the actual article either, because the headline is written to get the engagement, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
I think that one thing we need to recognize, the Atlantic magazine says that 52% of the accounts on social media platforms are bots.
52%?
52%, more than half. Okay, so it'd be interesting to see how many of those angry posts that end up under KMOV4's posts, how many of those are actually bots?
Some of them are easy to tell because it'll be like, great post, check out this video, and it's obviously like a clickbait link or something like that to, I don't know if it's a phishing thing or, probably a mix of both. But then there's also ones that like vaguely they're vaguely commenting on it, but it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
Or
so
there's a bunch of words misspelled.
What you want to look for, the number one clue if it's a bot is a username with a bunch of numbers at the end. So if it says like Julie6563592, that's a bot. You also want to look for bad grammar.
Right.
A lot of the bots originate from the former Soviet Union. They have trouble with our verb infinitives. They have trouble with our articles like a and the. They don't capitalize correctly. And so the grammar is a tip-off. And it's interesting, I've had a student say, well, then why don't they just get rid of all the bots? Well, if I'm X and 52% of my activity is bot-related, I'm not going to get rid of that because that increases my engagement, which increases my advertising revenue. I don't want half my audience to leave, even though it's not really an audience, but it's a business decision. And it all comes down to money.
It's the bottom line that they don't have the motivation to actually change it.
Yeah, why would they?
And hopefully I'm not misremembering this. Whenever Elon Musk bought Twitter, didn't he make a push to like eliminate the bots, or who knows if that actually ended up happening?
I don't know.
But yeah, and it's hard because whenever you love those platforms and how you can get delivered the news or just entertainment, whatever you're watching, and then the algorithm is there and you can't get rid of it no matter how hard you try. But like, is there not a way that maybe a new app could like get rid of that algorithm and actually appeal to people to not have that? Or
what's the appeal to not have the algorithm? Because then you'd be confronted with political posts that you disagree with. You'd be confronted with all kinds of stuff that you didn't necessarily choose. So there's a payoff, right? That the algorithms keep us insulated, and I think that's really comfortable for a lot of people. I'm not sure if we said, okay, everybody, you can get rid of the algorithms and you can see everything. I'm not sure many people would go for that.
I think I would, because maybe just because, here we are talking about
and you're a
all
journalism
this
major.
media literacy stuff, and if I had I think I would do that. But a lot of people either consciously or subconsciously are like, yeah, this is my bubble, this is where I get my news, and I like the way this guy gives news, and maybe he's coming from a good place, maybe he's not, and
it's hard to tell, especially with we're such a visual society now. We consume memes and infographics and charts and graphs a lot more than we actually read. And it's getting harder to tell, like the number one media literacy question, who's the sender of the message, right? With memes, you can know who shared that with you, but you have no idea who created it. And in many cases, a lot of the stuff that's quote unquote misinformation online, the pictures, the photographs are legit, but they've been recycled or reframed or repurposed for whatever that poster is trying to influence you.
And now AI is just getting better, literally by the minute.
It's crazy. It's
And
crazy.
some of them, like there was, around the election time, you had like videos of Trump and Biden, like on a fishing trip or something so ridiculous. You're like, okay, I think even my grandparents would be like,
That's probably not true.
That's
Yeah.
probably not real. But man, some of the images and videos are
It's hard to tell.
It is really hard to tell. And how many of the people who see that are going to go to Google and be like, find out if it was, the Snopes.com rating, if it was real or fake. So it's just.
One thing we recommend is if you see something online that seems a little fishy, we recommend something called lateral reading. So like if you see a meme or something that's quote unquote news on Facebook, and it's a pretty big story, but it seems a little fishy, what we would encourage you to do is to go to every other website, legit, BBC, New York Times, Washington Post, Associated Press, CNN, the biggies. If they're not talking about it, then that's the clue that it's probably not really happening.
Right.
You want to cast the net wide, as my dad would have said, to see how many sources are actually talking about the same thing.
Yeah. And then are there any other big things in media literacy besides like the misinformation stuff is obviously, it's interesting to talk about, but
It's so
like,
much more
is
than
there,
that.
Yeah, right. It is so much more than
Yeah.
that, but it's that's the main thing that comes to mind.
And that was something that I really tried to get across to the representatives in Jeff City, is that it's not all about quote unquote fake news. I mean, if that's what gets people excited about media literacy, then I'm all for it, but there's so much more to it than that. It's understanding where the money goes. It's understanding who the power players are. It's understanding how the algorithms work and how to train them. It's understanding how media have evolved through the years and what that means. It's being up on what the research is about how this is, how Instagram affects girls. It's very easy to find that sort of information. It's about recognizing bots. It's about using tools to verify photos. It's just so much more than recognizing what's fake and what's not.
How can journalists better cover it?
Cover media literacy or just cover everything?
Media literacy specifically.
I think that any journalist who talks about the process of media literacy rather than the product, I think is on the right track. And I would also recommend recognizing, as a journalist, recognizing your own biases. It's impossible to be completely objective because we're human.
Right.
Because we're human. But asking how would someone who votes differently than I do view this article and view my credibility?
Right. And you also have a book on media literacy, right?
I do. It's called Master the Media: How Teaching Media Literacy Can Save Our Plugged-In World.
All right.
And I really do believe that media literate, like if everyone was media literate, the world would be a very, very different place.
Yes, a hopeful title in the hope.
Fairly optimistic. Yes.
Fairly optimistic. Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about, or
No, I'm always very, very happy to talk about media literacy and encourage people to be really critical consumers. Who's the sender? What's their motive? How's the message designed? What information is left out? And who benefits or profits from this? If we would just get into the habit of asking those questions, and it does take time. It takes time and effort. But if we would just get in the habit of asking those questions, I think we would feel more in control of our mediated world rather than just these the recipients of all of this noise.
Right. Well, the sender is KMOV First Alert 4, and the guest is Julie Smith from Webster. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks so
We'll
much,
wrap it
Matt.
up there.
Thanks for listening and watching Backstory STL. We'll release new episodes every Wednesday. Check it out on the First Alert 4 app or wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.